The Chiefs walked away with a W, but we somehow ended up with more questions than answers, although a lot fewer questions than the rest of the AFC West. Let's talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to Keys to the Kingdom, your Monday morning brief on all things Chiefs. I'm Seth Kaiser, the Chief of the North, here with RGR Football. If you're watching this, you know all these things, but I feel inclined to say them anyway. First things first, before I do anything else, you will notice I'm wearing, of course, the gray and black that gets me mocked so often in terms of what I should be dressed like. For one thing, I can't help it. My job requires me to wear a suit. And for two, I actually thought it would be kind of funny to wear Raiders colors today just to celebrate the fact that they're 0-2 and look problematic, shall we say, which one of the first things I wanted to talk about this week. And so what I do every week here at Keys to the Kingdom, we talk about just a few of the storylines that I think are the most interesting that are floating around about the Chiefs. One of those storylines this week is the fact that the AFC West in general does still look tough. I'm not sure it's going to be as tough as what we originally thought. Now, the Chargers gave the Chiefs a great game. They're a really good team, incredibly talented. Honestly, I think if that game gets played 100 times, I think the Chiefs lose a little more often than they win, given the way Mahomes played and some of the problems that they had with the pass protection that we'll get to shortly. That said, every AFC West team that I'm seeing so far has a coaching problem. Staley seems to have moved away from the aggressiveness that was kind of his hallmark last year. And he has not shown anything schematically, at least on offense, that gives them an edge on Sundays or Thursdays. Although I would say one of the most interesting things that I saw from the game with the Chiefs and the Chargers does involve some stuff schematically on defense. We'll talk about that shortly. He's shown a little, but not a lot. The Broncos coaching situation looks like an abject disaster so far. We'll see if they can turn it around. You got 2 games in. Guys are learning on the fly. You have some really tough decisions that have been made, and it's cost them. And so that's a fascinating thing to watch. And then, of course, Josh McDaniels, who is now 0-2 as the Raiders head coach. They lost to the Cardinals that the Chiefs just came off shellacking, which you can't necessarily take anything from comparative scores. You know, Team A beat Team B, and then Team C beat Team A, which means, therefore, that Team C would beat Team B. It's not how it works. It's a styles make fights. It's a game of matchups. But it's fascinating a couple weeks in now. And remember, in week 15 or so, or even earlier, we're going to be laughing at some of the storylines that we believe here in week 2. But the Chiefs do have a quick jump on the division just by a game or so. They picked up so far a tiebreaker over the Chargers. It's starting off very well for the Chiefs in terms of what they're going to be looking for the playoff hunt. Every other AFC contender other than the Bills picked up a loss, it feels like. When the Bills haven't played yet. By the time you're watching this, maybe they have. But the Miami Dolphins are the only other 2-0 team right now. And apparently, Tyreek Hill was right about Tua in terms of being able to throw, 28 touchdowns or whatever it was. That's something to at least keep an eye on because it was surprising, to say the least. But in terms of where the Chiefs are at in the AFC West, the coach and the quarterback combination is always going to be the most important thing for any team in terms of, divisional races, playoffs, all that stuff. And right now, I'm still very comfortable saying, which I was before the season, but even more comfortable now, the Chiefs do have the best head coach quarterback combination in the AFC West. And that is hard to overcome for other teams. So there's a few things that I saw from the game that I'm going to be looking at this week. I've only written one article about the game so far because, you know what? I took my weekend and had fun with my family. But the thing that I wrote about was Chris Jones. You can check that out on the Chiefs North newsletter. I wrote about the way that he affected the game on third down, which was wildly important. Zion Johnson, the Chargers rookie right guard, really gave him all he could handle on multiple pass protection snaps. And he did a great job. Jones had a couple wins against him, but they were a little late developing wins, and Herbert gets the ball out very fast. Spagnuolo, in a decision that I think was one of those game-altering decisions, he said, why should I have Jones sit here and fight an incredibly difficult battle when I can just move him over to the other side and dominate, which is exactly what he did. That's good coaching. It's a smart move to take advantage of matchups. And that's one of the things that matters when you talk about offensive line. That's why weak links matter on the offensive line more than superstars. Sure, if you can have superstars at all 5 positions, that's great. But if you have one or two guys that are playing at a really high level defensive pass rushers, they can just avoid them to where you're not fighting guys to a stalemate, which is what elite players often do. And so that was a great move. Jones had some genuinely dominant snaps. He played a great game, and he also affected the game down the stretch. Go check that out at the Chief of the North newsletter, where I kind of wrote about how the attention he drew led to a lot of the pressure the Chiefs were getting in the second half. Um, so the defense, by and large, was the bigger reason they won against the Chargers. We always try to do this, is it 50-50, 60-40, 80-20, whatever it was. The offense struggled, especially for its normal level of explosiveness. And the Chiefs defense was asked to make essentially, it was like 7 straight stops in order to keep them in the game. And they even put points on the board to help them win the game. Without the defense, they don't win that game. That said, there were some weaknesses in the defense that looked like they were a little bit exposed by Herbert and the Chargers. The tackling in particular was a bummer. They showed such good swarming, tackling, finishing, speed all over the field against the Cardinals. Looked significantly worse. I counted at least half a dozen important missed tackles that allowed for 5-10 extra yards. That's something they've got to clean up. It seems like it's something they struggle with early every year. It looked like they might not this year, but we'll see how things look in week 3. But the other thing was some middle of the field coverages. Now, Herbert gets the ball out so fast that it's hard to make a quick judgment on this, but it did look like this was the first game where I felt like Nick Bolton's coverage stuff came back just a little bit in terms of where he was able to get depth and how much of the middle of the field he was able to cover. That said, they did more than enough to get it done, and it's tough to gauge those things against Herbert because he goes through his reads almost too quickly. He comes off some of those deep balls more quickly than he should, especially when it's working. And that's just an interesting thing in terms of how that affects the game overall. You're going to see more checkdowns, and you're going to see the middle of the field looking more vulnerable because he's going there more quickly. But in a way, I'm kind of glad he didn't keep going bombs away to Mike Williams down the field when it was working for either tremendous catches or pass interference calls. Get well soon, Trent McDuffie. The Chiefs definitely missed him. Sounds crazy about a rookie that only played 25, 30 snaps in week 1, but he was awesome. So hopefully he's obviously not going to be back for 4 weeks. The Chiefs do need to find a way to hold the line until he gets back. Another storyline that I think you should keep an eye on this week, and something I'm going to be writing about, is the pass protection. I'm probably going to write about that before I do the Mahomes film review. I'll kind of pick up some information as I chart for Mahomes, but I'm curious because the Chiefs, that was about as rough a pass protection game as the Chiefs have had since their new offensive line came into play last year. And what's interesting to me, and what I'm going to be really looking at, is how they got that pressure, because it wasn't just Mack and Bosa being monsters. They are, make no mistake. They had a few rushes where they were lining up on the same side, just very problematic. And they're just tough to deal with. Matt gave Orlando Brown Jr. some problems. Now, Brown had some good snaps against him, too. That's just the nature of the beast in those situations. But what was interesting to me is the Chargers blitzed a fair amount. I think it was maybe a quarter of the time, 30% of the time, about double what you normally see from teams with Mahomes. And unlike the Cardinals, they had some success with it. So I'm going to take a look at that, see if there's anything I can see there. I always hesitate to get too deep in the weeds on blitz packages, especially with stuff that I haven't really seen before. And some of the stuff they were doing was a little bit funky. And so what I'm curious about is what happened against the Chargers. Is that a sign of problems for things to come with pass protection, or is that kind of a one-off with a really good game plan, them being able to show Mahomes a few things he should have been shown before, as well as then also having a Bosa and a Mack rushing the passer? But it's something to keep an eye out for. The run game is something to pay attention to this week, I think, simply because the Chiefs do seem to be able to do it this year. They seem to be doing it at a competent level. Clyde Edwards-Helaire looks like he's fully healthy for the first time maybe in his career. They're actually utilizing him as a receiving threat out of the backfield. He ran an angle route. It was incredible, and ran over Derwin James when he did it. Those are things that are just interesting to me, if nothing else, that they're finally utilizing him a little more in the passing game, and they're having success with it. And I'm hoping to see them kind of keep tapping that easy button with that, because when he does get that ball in space, he's able to make a few guys miss. He's not huge on explosive plays, but he's those 5, 10, 15-yard plays because he can make a guy miss and get a little extra yardage, fight for some extra yardage in space. When he's fighting against defensive linemen, he's trying to gain those extra yards. His lack of size can sometimes stop him from really picking up those extra yards after contact against secondary players and even linebackers. His low center of gravity, his relative strength, that serves him a lot better because there's just not that huge size disparity there. Pacheco and McKinnon both look solid as well, but I'm just kind of interested in whether or not Andy Reid's going to be willing to lean on it just a little bit more as it looks competent, especially in games where blitz packages are getting home, where the pass rush is getting home. That's at least worth noting. A final note, obviously, I'll be writing about Mahomes this week, charting every snap. You know the drill by now. But what was interesting to me in this game is this was not a great game for Mahomes on first watch. When I'm watching the All-22 so far by my charting, it's not a particularly good game. Someone joked around that it would be great if PFF gave him like a 90 just to keep us on our toes. There were some issues throughout the game, but he was generally under an intense amount of pressure. He definitely threw more potential picks than he normally does, and it just seemed like they actually had him a little bit out of sorts. Like he wasn't always sure what he was seeing, and it's been a long time since we've seen that with Mahomes. What's interesting to me, though, is even in his bad games, he still makes enough plays to put points on the board. With a few, he'll give you at least 4 or 5 of those holy cow kind of plays that you just can't get anywhere else. And so I'm going to be looking at his snaps as well. I'm not sure what else I'll have time for to get through this week, but those really are some of the things that I would keep an eye on in terms of what you can learn about yourself playing a really talented division opponent. And we're going to just keep learning about the Chiefs more and more, who they are this year. This iteration of their offense looked unstoppable against the Cardinals, then suddenly looked really vulnerable against the Chargers. And we're going to get to go to week 3 and kind of see what's the tiebreaker. And at least moving forward, they're continuing to find out who they are. On a side note, Sky Moore had 2 snaps. I'm going to breathe through it because he looks like a guy who can help, who can win against aggressive press man coverages and can get some yards after the catch. And for some reason, he's not getting on the field much. I understand they've got other guys playing above him, but hopefully we'll see a little bit of a change in that. Those are all the things that I'm looking at this week. I hope that you have fun looking at them. Don't forget this Wednesday to watch my Twitter feed. I'll put up the mailbag question request, reply there, or go back to last week's mailbag, watch the whole thing, and like and comment and all that fun stuff. But you can put mailbag questions there. Make sure to put question marks after it or mailbag in all caps. And I'll be doing that on Thursday. In the meantime, make sure to check out everything Ryan's going on as RGR football here. Everyone's putting together great content. Check out the Chief of the North newsletter. Subscribe. You know the drill. You know how to support. It's awesome. You guys are great. And it's a great week to be a Chiefs fan. Appreciate you guys listening.